Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Rick Noguchi, President and CEO of California Humanities, and we're proud to host the Collective Joy Project, which is a public discourse series designed to explore how story, ritual, and culture can help us move through grief toward collective joy and future building. At a time when so much feels uncertain, we believe the humanities offer us tools to reflect, connect, and imagine new possibilities together. Thank you for being here, for showing up in this space, and for helping us center joy as a powerful practice. And now I'll turn it over to our Senior Program Officer, Mariana Moscoso, who will guide today's conversation. Over to you, Mariana.
Thank you so much, Rick, and hi, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today. I am really looking forward to today's conversation called Land Back, Joy Forward, Rematriation of Land and Indigenous Futures. And I couldn't be more honored to share space with our guest, Tina Orduno Calderon. Together, we're going to explore rematriation, land-based cultural practices, and the powerful role joy plays in shaping Indigenous futures. Tina Orduno Calderon is a culture bearer of Gabrielino, Tongva, Chumash, Yoeme, and Chicana descent. She is a wife, mother, grandmother, sister, and auntie to many, a singer, songkeeper, traditional dancer, storyteller, poet, and composer. Tina has composed over 24 songs in her ancestral languages of Tongva and Chumash. Tina is the Ocean Protectors Program Director for Sacred Places Institute for Indigenous Peoples and serves as a board member and cultural advisor to many organizations who are environmental champions. Tina frequently shares her passion around respecting land, water, minerals, plant, and animal relatives, as well as the sacred elements. Kamochave, thank you for joining us today, Tina.
Miihane aweshkoneha Mariana koi tokora tohovet. So I want to just say hello, everybody, and thank you, Mariana, and thank you to all the beautiful people that are joining.
Tina, so during these Collective Joys project sessions, we like to begin with a simple reflection on joy. So first, I'm going to open it up to all that are tuning in with us today. Drop into the chat something that's bringing you joy lately. It can be a word, a sentence, or a feeling. And if you're watching this recording, go ahead and leave it as a comment on Instagram or YouTube. So while folks are responding in the chat, Tina, I turned this question to you. What's something that's been bringing you joy lately?
I think for me, it's been the unity because so much toughness that we're going through right now, so many just horrible, horrible things. But I do see that all of our people are uprising and uniting together, and we're being stronger together. So that gives me hope and gives me joy.
Yes, me too. I share that feeling so much. And it looks like a couple folks have also answered in the chat. I see Paul say music and release through dance. Patricia Sage. Jen says my body and its strength. Julie says sunshine. Do any of the responses stand out to you, Tina?
So many good ones. Yes, Auntie Cat put acorns. Our time for acorns is coming up, and that's such an important medicine and food for us. And then I also like the moon. Mwad, so much amazing female energy.
Absolutely. And with the eclipse that just happened, so much power in this moment. Yeah, thank you everyone for your responses. What a beautiful way to start in this conversation to ground us. So, I want to begin this conversation very intentionally with you, Tina. And so, would you be willing to share a story, a practice, a teaching that reflects your relationship to land and joy, something that roots you in your work and that you carry with you?
Yeah, our teachings we're really, really super connected to nature as not only our environment, but as a relative and as a good part of us. And so day in and day out, like constantly, my what leads me is the teachings of being grateful, of respect, reciprocity, and responsibility. And so if I approach like everything that I have to deal with in that way. And I'm very spirit led, so I always like pray and ask for guidance before I even take any kind of action. So those are kind of the roots that were passed on to me by my teachers and ancestors. A lot of people are ancestors now, but my aunties and uncles.
Yeah, I think this relationship to the land and how deeply animated the land is both our relative and our ancestor, and living in this space of continuum in this deep relationship. And so as we start to like go in deeper to the phrase land back, which we know is not a catchphrase, but a deeply needed movement. Land back is about restoring Indigenous stewardship of ancestral lands, honoring sovereignty, sacred relationships, and the right to care for land according to Indigenous knowledge systems. So, with that in mind, I want to go even deeper into the concept of rematriation. We oftentimes hear repatriation, but can you share what rematriation means to you? And not just as a return to land, but as an Indigenous practice of reciprocity and return of relationships, responsibilities, and rhythms. How do you see joy showing up in that work?
Rematriation is joy. I mean, you think of it as our Earth Mother and the love she has for us because she provides everything we need. And so that rematriation is our reciprocal way of tending to our Earth Mother and giving back and making sure she's as healthy as she can be. And that ties us all into our cultural teachings, that we were the last beings to enter this realm. There was already an abundance of life and it was thriving without us. So we have that responsibility when we came to this realm to be good caretakers and to become part of the life that was already here in community. So yeah, I feel like rematriation is just giving that love back as a mother would and making sure that everything that thrives from our earth mother is healthy because what we do to nature we do to ourselves, right? And when our land is healthy, not only are the people healthy, but all peoples, the plant peoples, the animal peoples, the environment, the sacred elements. So it's just all so interrelated.
Absolutely. And this really brings me to think about language and my own journey of reconnecting to my ancestral roots. So I've begun learning Sutuhil, and in that process, I really come to understand just how deeply relational the language is, how I, like as a singular person, exist only in relationship with other people, other land, and non-human kin around me. And so in your work, you've composed more than 2 dozen songs in your ancestral languages. Can you share how language and song connect you to land and how they serve as vessels for memory, resistance, and joy?
Yes, I am studying two of my ancestral languages, Shmuich, which is a dialect of Chumash, and Tongva, which is what we refer to for the Tongva peoples. And what I've learned when I first started learning the language, what drove me to it was I wanted to be able to introduce myself in my language and to pray in my language. That was the two key things. And so, thinking of songs, our songs are prayers. Our songs have purpose. Our songs are for specific ceremonies and reasons that we sing them, right? And so, diving into our languages, what I realize is not only does it tie us to place, and not only does it tie us to ancestors, it is so rich in our ideologies and our way of being and our way of seeing our existence in this realm. And so oftentimes people will ask, like, how do you say this in Tongva? How do you say this in Chumash? But they're coming up with these things they want to express that reference today's ways of thinking, but it might not be a way of our a thinking that our ancestors had. So we might not have an exact way to express that. So we have to get creative and we have to really think about it and then present something that has the same overall idea and context. But sometimes our words are just so deep that there is no English translation, and it can't be literal, but it could be expressing the concept, like the concept of spirit as energy and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Just yesterday, I was introduced to a traditional song. It's not my specific group, so I'm part Ashimaya, and this group is Maya Tzotzil, and they were singing a song of planting. And it was not only were they singing to the seed so that the seed would grow, they were also singing to the earth and saying, right now, I'm going to open you and I'm going to put this seed, who is another child, right? Because we're the people of corn. And so the corn is an embodiment of ourselves, but also our sustenance, right? It is everything that we are. And so, the earth being this mother, we ask for permission to open and to put in the seed. And then we ask for her to care for that seed so that it can grow. And yeah, and hearing it, I don't speak Tzotzil, but just hearing the language, it's almost as if, like, on a spiritual level, I can understand what they're saying. And I was wondering, um, what kind of openings like that have you found in your um, personal rematriation process of reconnecting to language?
Thank you for sharing that too about the song. That's just so beautiful. Um, yeah, so the way that we were taught, our person who was our plant person in the Tongva community was Auntie Barbara Drake. She's crossed over now. But she had taught us so much more than just the reciprocal ways of being. Um, but how she really, really like connected to every single plant as a relative. And the thought of how these relatives that we have been connected to for millennia, our ancestors were connected to, that they recall our language as well, and that they long to hear these languages that they have heard for millennia. And just like we have DNA memory, they have DNA memory. So I like to, I am a singer, right? So I just love to go out and acknowledge these plant relatives and our earth mother and all the elements with song, like I said, because those are prayer. So I feel like we're not only acknowledging them, but it's almost like leaving them that reciprocal gift to thank them for their existence and for everything they provide. And so yeah, if I see a hummingbird, I'm gonna sing Pinoy, one of our hummingbird songs. If I'm seeing these beautiful medicines that are growing from the ground, and before I harvest from it, I'm gonna make sure that I leave a gift, but I'm also gonna offer a song to give it thanks for what they provide. So I feel like that is another part of reciprocity, and the fact that even science proves like our percussion instruments. And for us, we didn't have a drum. For us, it's the clapstick that's made out of an elderberry branch. But that percussion is actually giving an energy that the roots can feel and stimulates them to grow. So it's all that gift that, before I take from you, I want to give you this and express my gratitude, but also to help you to thrive.
Yeah, that is incredibly, it resonates so deeply with me and is such a deep source of joy. And in this time of really immense climate grief and displacement and disconnection, um, I really think that Indigenous teachings can teach us a lot about how to also grieve with the land and heal with it. What are your thoughts about that?
It's kind of it's been so heartbreaking and so sad to see what has happened to our nature and our environment, our ecosystems in such a short, relatively short amount of time, right? 400 years is not that long because when you think about our ancestors being here for thousands and thousands of years, countless thousands, and when you look at the writings of the people who came here from across the shores, they always say like this was an untouched paradise. And I always think, no, paradise, yes. Untouched, no. We totally touched it. We just didn't alter it. We didn't harm it. We had these very reciprocal teachings about how to deal with the environment. So to see what has happened to our waters, to see how they're being dammed, concreted, controlled. The waters are no longer free to flow as the spirits that they are. It's heartbreaking, and to see that the soil that's supposed to just smell like an abundance of health and minerals and so much goodness, it's like dust now. And you think of the pesticides, the herbicides, all the horrible things that we have done, as well as stopping the water flows to our Earth Mother. So that part is heartbreaking. But what I do see is with people coming in together to work as community, environmental groups, tribes, so many different good-hearted peoples that want to do better and want to heal our Earth Mother, knowing that if we don't have clean air, we don't have clean water, we don't have, healthy soils, we're not going to have what we need to survive. No life will have what it needs to survive. So I feel like there's this huge awareness of people coming together to be better relatives. And it really needs to be Indigenous led because we're the ones who know our lands. We're the ones that know what's supposed to be thriving here and how to deal with them. So I just see that, again, a little bit of hope, that as people come together and they want to learn more and they're open to it, and more important, that they will practice it because our tribes are very small nations compared to the overall population. So we need everybody. We need people who call this their home today to pitch in and to help us.
Yeah, thank you so much for that response, which makes me think about how land stewardship is responsibility. And what you were speaking to is in terms of rematriation is the returning of that love, of that reciprocity, and that abundance that the earth gives us without very much. I always think about fruit trees. You plant a tree and it is so abundant that we now live in these parcels that are all separated, but and so we have this abundance that grows on this tree, and so many people have to like give it away because it's so much, right? And it's such an important lesson that I have learned in my own experience is just how these systems make us think that there's not enough. And that is not the lesson that comes from the earth. The earth says there's more than enough for all of us. But we do have that responsibility of being good stewards of the land. And so, you know, speaking of that responsibility, I know being a culture bearer is a really big part of like stewardship and cultural responsibility. And so how do you see joy not only as a feeling, but as a responsibility to future generations, to the land, to our more than human kin, and to your ancestors?
Our tribes, as well as I think most Indigenous peoples, do have that belief system that we need to leave this earth better than we found it, and we need to think about the 7 generations to come, and that we take very seriously. So if we're not doing our very best to bring everything back to health, we're not going to leave that world to our children and our grandchildren and our great grandchildren and those that we've yet to meet who deserve to come into this realm with this beautiful paradise that they talked about, right? So that's where like our responsibility comes into place. But I think about it's not just nature as a thing, right? When we think about how beautiful this space is. Creator gave us everything that we need to survive, and not just humans. Like there's unique ecosystems, and each ecosystem provides an abundance for what it needs to provide for. And so things that most people would just not even think about or take for granted, like the sand dunes. Nobody thinks about sand dunes, but they were here on our coast. They were abundant, and there are unique ecosystems that rely on these sand dunes. And what did colonizers do? They came and they knocked it down so they could build right onto the beach. Well, now we're doing restorations for these sand dunes, and you're seeing this abundance of life come back in the ecosystem, right? So that's just one example. The wetlands, we had an abundance of wetlands, and now that they're suffering. But as you have environmental groups and tribes that are working towards getting this back into the health and letting the waters flow the way they're supposed to, again, you see these ecosystems thriving. You see animals coming back that haven't been present for a very long time. So it's just all hand in hand, but I do see that as our responsibility.
Yeah, and you've already spoken to this a little bit, but I was wondering if you could go even deeper about, this thinking about this responsibility and what gives you hope in this moment, and what seeds do you see being planted for Indigenous futures?
I think the biggest thing that gives me hope is the fact that we are finally, as Indigenous peoples, being called to the table with state entities, federal entities, city entities, and even in big environmental groups that, have thousands of followers. It's really important because we're not the first to do this work. I stand on the shoulders of giants, and there was a lot of people that were my teachers that have been speaking of this for 35 plus years, but they were never invited to the table. So the voice only got heard by a very select few of us. And now traditional ecological knowledge, it's a thing. They want to receive all this information, all these downloads. So we're actually being brought to the table. And now we're being in a position where you're not only just at the table, but you have the rights to decide how much you want to disclose to these entities, because it could be very extractive too. So we're very giving people. We want to give everything that will help the environment. But if it's just being extractive and they don't get the concept of prayer and ceremony and doing things in a loving way, which brings us back to the rematriation, then it's up to us to hold on to our data sovereignty and give that to the people who are going to do good with it. So I like that we have that position now where they're actually not only willing to listen to us, but they're almost desperate that they want to learn these ways because they know that they've made a big mess out of things, and we need to go back to the traditional ways to fix it.
Absolutely. Wow, that's so powerful. And I think that this work is definitely a legacy of the ancestors that is being carried forward. So thank you for inviting them into this space. And time goes by really fast. So before we close out, Tina, would you be open to sharing a word, a song, or a reflection that we can carry with us? It can be something small as we move forward with our day or our days.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about what to offer. We talked about like a poem or song, but I was thinking of a gratitude song. We have our Mother Earth song, but it's a lot of words. It's a little bit harder for folks to kind of catch on to. So I'm going to share a more simple song. It is a gratitude song. The way that we express our gratitude is awesh koneha, which means I'm happy. Because when things are following the way it's supposed to be, when people are doing what they're supposed to do, our heart feels good, right? But this song says Neshun Aweshko. It literally talks about your heart, how your heart is happy. And then it says Tua Nehi no Tehovet Mo, which is We count our blessings. And that means that we don't look at anything as too small to give thanks for. Every single gift. When you wake up in the morning and you open up your eyes and take a new breath, it's something to be thankful for, right? So everything is a gift. And it goes like this. Nishuna weshko, Nishuna weshko, Nishun, 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 Nishuna weshko. Tuane hino te hovemo, Tuane hino te hovemo, Nishuna weshko, Nishuna weshko. Nishun, 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 Nishun aweshko. Tuane hino te hovemo. Tuane hino te hovemo. Nishun aweshko. Nishun aweshko. Nishun, 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 Nishun aweshko. Tuane hino te hovemo. Tuane hino te hovemo. Neshuna weshko. Thank you.
Tina. Thank you so much, Tina, for your generosity, presence, and thank you to everyone who joined us live or is watching the recording. And we'd love to hear how this conversation made you feel. Feel free to drop in a word or an emoji in the chat or the comments before we close out. And while folks are responding in the chat, Tina, would you be willing to share a word or sentence of how this conversation made you feel today?
I love that word joy that you all chose. It's not a word that we always focus on. And I am feeling joy. I'm feeling joy being able to share some words with these beautiful peoples and meeting you and getting to know you better, Mariana. Thank you to California Humanities. So yeah, I think I'm feeling quite a bit of joy right now and just I wish going to have. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot of joy too and hopeful for the future because of elders that are stewarding the way, because you exist in this world, Tina. And thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom with us. So if you'd like to learn more about Tina's work, or the Sacred Places Institute, you have some links in the chat. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And don't forget that we will be back next month on October 7th with Judith Israel from Israel Family Farms for our next Collective Joy Project conversation, where we'll continue talking about land back. Make sure to follow us on Instagram or sign up for our newsletter to stay connected. And until then, don't forget, joy is a strategy. Carry it forward. Thanks, y'all.